Iran stands today on the edge of a crisis so severe, so deeply rooted in decades of neglect, mismanagement, climate pressure, and political denial, that entire cities now tremble at the thought of taps running dry forever. People across the country wake up each morning fearing that this might be the day water stops flowing, the day the last reservoir hits empty, the day survival becomes a personal battle. Iran, once home to ancient irrigation systems and brilliant water engineering, now finds itself fighting for every drop as rivers shrink to sand, lakes collapse into dust bowls, and millions brace for a future where thirst becomes normal. The tragedy is painful, not only because the nation is drying, but because it didn't have to be this way. The story of Iran's water emergency begins long before the present moment, stretching through years of policies that looked useful on paper, but created disaster in practice. Large dams built for prestige and political applause trapped natural rivers, disrupting ancient groundwater cycles. Farmers encouraged to grow water-intensive crops like rice, watermelons, and pistachios in some of the driest regions of the Middle East, pulled water from aquifers faster than nature could refill them. Industrial expansion, population growth, and urban sprawl around Tehran placed pressure on systems already shrinking from climate change. Year after year, as rain patterns changed and heat intensities climbed, the government insisted that things were under control, even when experts warned that catastrophe was inevitable. Tehran, the heart of the nation, sits like a thirsty giant with more than 8 million lives depending on water supplies that simply no longer match the demand. Reservoirs once filled with snowmelt from the Alborz Mountains now struggle to reach even half of their historical levels. Streams that fed the capital for centuries are barely recognizable. You can walk along dried riverbeds that once roared with life, now cracked like the surface of an abandoned planet. Many families today report water pressure dropping so low that taps run at a trickle for hours, and in some neighborhoods water appears only a few days a week. Buying bottled water is no longer a convenience, it is survival. Across the countryside, the emotional toll is just as heavy. Farmers who once grew crops passed down for generations now watch their lands turn into beige wastelands. Wells that supported entire villages have collapsed, leaving only salty residue. Thousands have migrated from rural areas into cities, creating social strain and hopelessness. When farmers lose water, they lose income, identity, and purpose. Many say the loss feels like losing family. Parents cry at night because they cannot imagine their children inheriting land that no longer produces anything. A generation of Iranians is being raised in dust storms created by dried lake beds like Lake Urmia, once the largest saltwater lake in the Middle East, now a shadow of its former glory. As the crisis deepens, conflict grows. People stand in long lines for tanker trucks. Some communities accuse officials of water theft. In several regions, violent protests have erupted because residents believe others are receiving water unfairly. Water, once a symbol of purity and life, has become a source of tension and anger. The fear of social collapse grows stronger the longer the taps stay dry. Scientists warn that Iran's climate is changing faster than the infrastructure built to support it. Heat waves last longer, evaporation rates rise, and rainfall becomes unpredictable. What Iran loses in a single dry summer takes years to recover, but nature is no longer getting those years. The country is warming at nearly twice the global average. Every time farmers pump groundwater, they pull from reservoirs that took thousands of years to fill. Once gone, they will not return in any human lifetime. Iran is using ancient water to solve modern problems, and this is a battle that cannot be won by force. Around Tehran, the crisis feels like it is closing in from all directions. The city's population keeps rising while water supplies shrink. Some officials quietly admit that without major change, Iran could face its first true mega-city water collapse. Imagine 10 million people needing water and not enough supply to meet even the basics. Hospitals, schools, factories, and homes depending on daily water flow, all suddenly struggling to function. The consequences would be unimaginable: mass migration, economic breakdown, and humanitarian emergency on a scale the country has never seen. And yet, despite the warnings, so much of the damage happened because leaders refused to accept the truth. Political competition and pride overpowered common sense. Instead of promoting efficient irrigation, water-saving crops, and sustainable management, many politicians insisted on outdated strategies, building more dams, drilling deeper wells, and pushing agricultural expansion where the land simply could not support it. For decades, short-term wins replaced long-term planning. Every year of delay brought Iran 1 year closer to the crisis it faces today. But the greatest tragedy is emotional, the sense of helplessness spreading among ordinary Iranians. They watch their lakes disappear, their rivers die, their farms collapse, and their children grow up coughing from dust storms. They ask why their homeland, blessed with centuries of engineering wisdom, ended up here. Many feel abandoned by a system that ignored scientists until the water was already gone. Some whisper fears that mass displacement, not drought, will define the next generation. Still, there is resilience deep in Iranian society. People are finding small ways to conserve water, to adapt, to push for accountability. Environmental activists risk prison to raise awareness. Youth groups are cleaning rivers and planting trees. Farmers in some regions are switching to smarter irrigation and water-light crops. Iranian engineers are developing modern recycling and desalination projects that might one day stabilize the crisis. But these efforts must grow quickly, because time is no longer a luxury the nation has. Iran stands today at a crossroads between acknowledging reality or continuing down a path toward irreversible collapse. A future where cities shut down, where families fight over tankers, where millions migrate, is still avoidable, but only through courage, honesty, and urgent action. If the nation confronts the problem with unity and transparency, it can still protect its future. If not, the crisis will define every generation that comes after. A nation shouldn't have to beg for water. It shouldn't fear every summer. It shouldn't watch nature die and call it normal. Iran is thirsty not just for water, but for accountability, for truth, and for leadership that understands the weight of this moment. The country stands at breaking point now, and the world watches closely because the lessons of Iran's water emergency do not belong to Iran alone. They belong to every nation that believes water can be taken for granted. Iran's story is a warning, one written in dust, fear, and the unending search for a single drop of hope.